Okay, hi there, everybody. This is Dan Cirucci, and I'm here with Adam Perry. And Adam, you're down there in Chesapeake, Virginia.
Absolutely. I'm in Chesapeake, Virginia. It's the second largest city in Virginia. So I'm here to represent our area of the
Tell us,
country.
where exactly is Chesapeake? I guess it's near the Chesapeake Bay, is it, or what?
It is. Chesapeake is in the southeastern corner of Virginia, bordering Virginia Beach to our east. So we're very near the beach and the water. Our city is very large, area-wise and population-wise. People don't realize that because we don't have it's a new city. It's an emerging city. We don't have a traditional urban area the way that other cities do, but we've got 240 some thousand people in our city that are proud to call Chesapeake home.
Well, and you grew up in that area, Adam?
Yeah, I've been here since I was in elementary school.
So you have very, very strong ties to the area.
Very much. My family lives here, and it's the place that we chose to call home after we finished school.
Well, Virginia is a lovely state, and that part of Virginia is really beautiful. I'm quite familiar with it. Now, you are involved in politics there, Adam. What were you on the planning board or something?
Yeah, I've been involved in local politics within the party structure since the early 2000s, different executive committees and candidate canvassing committee type activities leading our local party. Separate from that, I was the chairman of the Chesapeake Planning Commission, which approves all of the projects and zoning changes and different construction type activities within our city, which is growing very rapidly. So we have a lot of work to do.
What was that like to be on that commission?
It was fascinating because I got to meet so many people who were coming before our committee or board, I guess you could say, who were investing in building something. They were passionate about the business they were opening or the building that they were constructing or what they were expanding. And it's refreshing to be around so many people who are doing things. They're doers. And it was also troubling to encounter some of the opposition that people had, not necessarily to development. Everything, has its proper place and needs to be organized. There's a role for zoning constitutionally and things like that, but moreover, the anti-progress type people who, once they establish themselves, it's okay for them and nobody else. And I think it really parallels how a lot of the Democrats nationally in national politics behave, where once they reach a certain income or a certain status, they think that they are considered exceptional and everybody else must operate differently.
Yeah, one set of rules for them and a different set for everybody else. And people reach a sort of elite status, if you will, or establishment status.
Right, and not only that, it's offensive to them that somebody would attempt to build themselves up to try to achieve that level of elite status that they have achieved. And I think that's more of the parallel.
Now, Adam, I know you're very involved with your church down there, and your church, even with the stringent policies that Governor Ralph Northam of Virginia put in effect during this COVID crisis, your church found a way to have services. Tell us about it.
Absolutely. It's something I'm very, very proud of for our church and many churches like it. I think a lot of people are under the misconception that the government has told us that we cannot worship and it's anti-Christian. And I understand why they would think that, but actually our church viewed this pandemic lockdown as an opportunity. We can still worship God. There's no restriction against that, following the appropriate guidelines that our governor has put in place and the health department, the distancing. We actually laid out our parking lot and set up broadcasting equipment so that we could have our church service broadcast like a drive-in theater from the roof of our church. Everybody's in their cars, there's a space between each spot, but there's an aspect of fellowship together with, being amongst your church family that I think it's been very important to keep that continuing, to give people
amazing.
encouragement.
What did they do? Did they listen to the church service through the radio in their car?
Yes, they purchased an FM transmitter. It goes a little, an area around the church, and they tune to the right channel. We worship together. The pastor climbs up a ladder onto the roof, 40 feet above the surface, and preaches from the rooftops. So the way we look at it is, we went from being inside a building closed up to having the word of God preached from the rooftops in our city. Isn't that remarkable?
That, I think it's incredible. I think it's wonderful. Now, Adam, how do you feel? What are your thoughts about the Christian evangelical movement and similar Christian movements and their connection with the Republican Party, the conservative movement, and the conservative candidates?
Well, it's funny you asked that. The same pastor who is currently preaching from the roof of our church also published a book in 2016. And the premise of his book was that for 20 years, from the mid-'80s to basically present day, churches have, not everybody, but a lot of churches have maybe mistakenly caused people to have the impression that the way to exercise their faith in public is to participate in politics and vote for Republican candidates. As somebody who is an evangelical Christian, and it's very important to me, that's the way, as a young person growing up in the church, that's what motivated me to get involved in politics. The way that we solve all of these problems in America, in the world, if we could only get the right political leaders into office, all of these problems would go away. And what his book stated, or brought to light, is that that hasn't been the case, and that we shouldn't rely on any political leaders, Republican or Democrat, to solve spiritual problems.
So if America is facing a spiritual crisis,
right,
we shouldn't expect to fix that through the political system.
We for too long have been searching for secular solutions to spiritual problems. For example, when there's a political crisis in Chesapeake, such as, and maybe not Chesapeake, but abortion, for example. It's a sensitive topic, but we'll bring it up for an example. If I announced on your program that we were having a march against abortion in Washington, D.C., meet me there next week, thousands of your viewers will come and join me to march to protest abortion. We're exercising our political rights, huge turnout, and we'd all feel good that we're, fired up, sticking it to the man. However, if I were to announce on your show that there were some mothers who were debating a very tough choice on, do they keep the baby, do they not keep the baby, and they need support, they need love and encouragement, they need supplies, they need childcare, all of the things that go into maybe making them feel comfortable making a choice to have that baby, the turnout is often very low and people aren't interested.
Mm-hmm. There's a good example. So, it goes back, actually, Adam, to something that liberals say a lot, which is, you need to be the change you want to see in the world.
I think there's some truth to that. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So maybe, although there's few groups that are more involved in the political system than liberals, but maybe in this department, liberals are also doing something to change the culture in an active way, not necessarily something we agree with, on a daily basis, that we could take a lesson from if they really are attempting to be the change that they want to see in the world. Now, would you agree, Adam, that I was just reading an article today that said few presidents have done more for the Christian right, if you will. I hate that term, but for conservative Christians, okay, than President Trump.
I completely agree with that. I think that while I agree,
done more for the movement.
but 100%, I think that for the first time, at least in my lifetime, and the previous presidents before that I've studied, Donald Trump, personality aside,
Right.
style aside,
Right.
is standing up for us the way that nobody has before. He is not ashamed to defend what we all believe to be true.
Yeah.
Rather than,
So
I call them,
is,
beta male Jeb Bush types.
yes.
We shouldn't apologize for doing the right thing. And I think that Donald Trump is an expression of our disappointment with leaders in the past.
Yeah, and has kept his promises, like, particularly in the appointment of judges and justices to the Supreme Court, and his defense and fighting for religious liberty and for so many things that conservative Christians believe. But now you are somewhat troubled by what's happened during this COVID crisis and the powers that have been turned over to the government, but more so, even as I understand it, the powers that have been turned over to the bureaucratic state and experts, so-called experts in the bureaucratic state.
It's funny you say that. I read an interesting commentary on experts. I think that so many people, as a crutch in an argument or in a discussion about this pandemic, they say, just listen to the experts. Just listen to the scientists. You're not a scientist. Your opinion doesn't matter. I am not a scientist. But would you agree that every doctor would tell you that consuming alcohol is not a healthy activity for your body or your liver? In any moderation, in any amount, it is not a healthy activity. Experts would tell you, you probably shouldn't do that. How many people control the amount of alcohol that they consume? They don't listen to the experts. So I thought that was an interesting illustration. But as far as,
right,
it has been remarkable how many people feel like they cannot make a decision for themselves without somebody with a title, however they came to that title, telling them it is okay to take an action or not. There's a role for experts, there's a role for doctors, there's a role for scientists. That's all very important. But on a bigger scale, the reliance on other people to think for them is very troubling. It's a troubling trend.
We have the situation here where a group of experts stepped forward and basically they ordered the shutdown of our country.
Right.
I mean, isn't this what happened?
I have been following the virus since the week after New Year's, the beginning of January. So I was an early observer. And I'm not an expert, but I was observing it. And what I observed in China scared me to death. It was incredible, the things that I saw.
From the very beginning.
From the very beginning. Before it was a crisis, before it was anything. I was watching some things in China through some business activities that we have. And it was scary. I'll admit that. I'm, conservative Republican, and it's scary. But I think that in the beginning, we took the appropriate measures to react to something scary and dangerous. But I think the other thing is that people are demonstrating an unwillingness to consider new information and adjust to the new information. We took a very tough shutdown, lockdown. It's probably appropriate at the time. The situation is appearing to change. And people are not willing to change their opinion on the lockdown or the shutdown.
And
maybe
it's one size fits all hasn't worked.
Not at all.
I mean, like even in Virginia, there's areas of Virginia that are more densely populated. Okay.
Right.
In Northern Virginia and the area near Washington, D.C., there's areas presumably where you are that are less densely populated.
Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia can not be more different than Chesapeake. And I'm very proud to say that in every aspect. But you're right. It's dense. It's different. The documented cases are different. The ability and the hospital capacity to treat people is very different here. And I think that, we should begin to kind of explore what we can do to move forward and not continue to rely on, fear and stimulus checks.
Well, I know, and when you consider the trillions of dollars, and you pointed out to me some of the things that were in the last stimulus bill that were in that bill, and the amounts of money, it was just staggering at him, and things that had absolutely nothing to do with the COVID crisis. And here we're facing it again with Nancy Pelosi decorating another Christmas tree for herself, or at least she's trying to anyway.
Absolutely. People see it as an opportunity. And I think that the actions that different governors and mayors and have taken across the country show, when given the opportunity, what they're capable of to do to people for reasons unrelated to the virus.
Yeah, I have to ask you, as a native Virginian, does it trouble you that over the course of your lifetime, you've seen the state move from red to purple to blue, that has become increasingly liberal and increasingly democratic?
Well, first of all, yes, it troubles me. But I can tell you that in Chesapeake, a city that considers itself a Republican city, 7 of the 9 people on our city council are Republicans. They don't necessarily govern that way. And I think that there is, or has been, maybe some misidentification of people at every level of government in Virginia that maybe has covered up the fact that we might have been purple for a little bit longer than we've been letting on.
So the Republican Party in Virginia, for a long time, the people that have really been controlling it have been pushing a sort of Republican light. Is that what has happened, or what? I don't understand.
There has been.
We have seen that in New Jersey.
Right. Statewide is different than locally. I'll address statewide first. It's not so much that there's been a pushing of Republican light, so much as there has been a total fear and disgust with people who are maybe more aggressive or more conservative in the vein of Donald Trump that have come over the years before Donald Trump.
Well, I think you hit upon it when you said fear.
Right.
That they're afraid to put up anybody that may be perceived as too conservative, for fear that they're going to lose they put up somebody who's less conservative and they lose anyway.
Right, and
don't
that brings me back to the local illustration that I have. A few months ago, I'm not sure exactly how long it was. A few months ago, there was a movement in Virginia during the General Assembly session to try and express to our governor that people were not happy with their Second Amendment rights being taken away.
Oh, yes.
And different cities began to pass legislation at the local level, declaring themselves to be, it's symbolic, Second Amendment sanctuary cities.
Right.
Do you remember that?
Yes, it was all over the news.
It was all over the news. In Chesapeake, again, our city is, at the local level, predominantly Republican, 7 out of 9 on city council, I think 8 out of 9 on school board, and all of the constitutional offices. When it came time, when that movement came to Chesapeake, over 1,000 people came to a city council meeting demanding or asking that Chesapeake be declared a Second Amendment sanctuary city. The problem is, when you're meeting with people from the Rotary, or you're meeting with business people who you're asking to support you for city council, that's considered a third rail. And the people in Chesapeake decided that they didn't want to be associated with those groups of people trying to protect their Second Amendment rights. So they came up with a way to kind of skirt the issue and declare that they don't just love the Second Amendment, they love all the amendments. So we're going to be a constitutional city, which is better than a sanctuary city, because they don't want to be known as the people who, associated with that kind of movement.
Yes.
And we see that time and time again, where
absolutely
there is an opportunity, whether at the national level, when we controlled the House, the Senate, and the president, right, whether there was at the local level where we control a supermajority on the council, to make changes to make our city a more family-friendly city.
Right.
As a conservative, in the last, 5 years, we've approved slot machines. We have approved, more nightlife and expanding that. That's the direction that they're taking us, because it's nobody wants to be the prude to say that, maybe we don't need a line of bars and clubs in our thing.
Radical, and they don't want to be seen as too extreme. And you remember when Ronald Reagan said we've got to paint in bold colors. We've got to make bold contrasts if we hope to win. We've got to paint a strong contrast. And yet so many Republicans keep going back and dipping into the beige color. Okay?
Exactly. And even
they're afraid to paint in bold colors.
Right. One of the issues that we discussed on Planning Commission, I'll give you 2 examples, was it came, it's a long story, but it came to our attention that there was illicit behavior happening at massage parlors in our city. And the idea is that we talk about, we're a family-friendly city, we're conservatives, there's human trafficking elements in a lot of these places. Right. Maybe this is something we should address. And we were stonewalled. They laughed at us. They said, who cares? And I think that the reason people elected Donald Trump as opposed to any other Republican that was available is because they were tired of being told, who cares? It's not important.
Right.
Let's address it now.
He found issues that nobody was talking about, that he discovered, and this is the essence really of populism, that he went out and spoke to ordinary people, something he's been doing all his life from when he worked for his dad on construction sites.
Yes.
Okay. And when he used to go around to his father's apartment buildings and collect coins from the laundromats in those buildings, he would talk to the everyday people and listen to them. and he developed a keen sense of what their real concerns were. And so Donald Trump comes up in 2016, and he starts talking about something that hardly anybody else is talking about, immigration. And everybody wonders, where the hell did he get this notion from? And the point was that he got it exactly from the people.
You're 100% correct.
Yeah, that the people that nobody else was paying attention to, or as he came to call them, the forgotten people. An amazing, and we can go on about this, but we don't have that kind of time. The amazing thing was that the media, that's supposed to be in a certain respect the voice of the people, vox populi, they weren't talking to the people either. They were just
The media is ridiculous.
I mean, right? They were talking to one another.
Absolutely, and that is the same thing with the pandemic. It is impossible to watch the news to find out important information. When do I go back to work? When can my child go to the playground? The playground. When is the park going to be open in our town? I can't even get that information from the news, which is straightforward information I need, because they're talking about, so-and-so was caught walking down the street not wearing a mask. So-and-so was doing this, and it's ridiculous.
It's
Anybody who pays for the Virginia pilot, they're an embarrassment to themselves.
You're talking about the newspaper down there, that's your
Yes.
local newspaper. Now, Adam, you have a Republican congressman, and he's retiring now. But you said that he was one of the first ones to see the danger and the challenge of China. Tell us about that.
This is fascinating, and I haven't seen this reported anywhere or seen an article about this. But I don't want people to forget about this. Our congressman retired. I think it was a little over a year ago.
Oh,
Republican
so he's
congressman.
retired already.
He did a little over a year ago.
Okay.
He stepped away from his seat, but he was there for 16 years or so, since 2001. The point is, in the mid 2000s, he established the Congressional China Caucus in order to study the emerging threat of China. And nobody in Congress was interested. It got no traction. People in Congress didn't want to recognize it. But he knew, thankfully, at that time, he was able to observe that China was an emerging threat to us, an adversary, not an ally. And that while everybody was distracted with, the Middle East and Russia, because for whatever reasons, China was not so secretly rapidly expanding their investment in the military, rapidly expanding their technology, offensive technology and intellectual property, no regard to that. And they're a big problem for us. Our manufacturing, much of it has been outsourced there. We're very reliant on them in a very dangerous way. And I'm very thankful that he had the foresight to attempt to address that.
Oh my goodness. Thank God somebody was looking at it, and goodness knows now it's a major, major problem. Some people are saying we're going to have the Cold War with China now. Of course, Donald Trump was also one of the first ones to warn about China, and he did not hesitate to launch the trade war with China. But Adam, it's been great chatting with you. I think if only to dispel the notion by people that there are thoughtful, sensible conservatives in Virginia. It must be a difficult time where you had the governor involved in a scandal, you had the lieutenant governor in a scandal, you had the, attorney general in a
The scandals are outrageous. The scandals are outrageous. And frankly, the scandals about Joe Biden are outrageous. People have known Joe Biden is a pervert weirdo for 30 years, and nobody cared. Nobody cared. And that, to me, all his congressional or senatorial colleagues knew he was a weirdo. They didn't care. They thought he was their buddy. John McCain, best friends with Joe Biden. They're pals. They hang out. Nobody actually addressed any of the problems with these Democrats, and until it's too late. People could have exposed Joe Biden 20 years ago, his children, the things he's involved in. They would not have gotten involved in those deals in China if they didn't think it was okay and acceptable and hadn't been doing it for so long.
Well, that's because they held themselves to one standard and they held everybody else to a different standard. They held themselves to, there was a basic phoniness about it, a hypocrisy about it that was built into it. My goodness, it was Biden himself who presided over the Clarence Thomas hearings. Okay.
Absolutely.
And the whole Anita Hill thing. And now some liberals were upset with him that he didn't go far enough. But he certainly wasn't an ally of Clarence Thomas. But this was, as you say, this was all happening when people knew about Biden himself and his own issues. That was a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Let's call it issues, his own issues. I think that's a very tactful way of putting it, Adam. This has been, it's been a wonderful conversation. Go ahead.
But one of the things I think, the last things I would say in Donald Trump's favor is how appreciative I am that he has avoided getting us into additional wars unnecessarily.
Okay.
I think the opportunity has been there on multiple occasions to draw us into a physical war with Syria or Lebanon or, for that matter, Russia. The things that some of these Democrats have been saying,
right.
Hillary Clinton, and for that matter, before he passed away, John McCain, the list of countries that we would have aggressively invaded or attacked was very long, if only to save face, to be considered tough Democrats. And I think that Donald Trump's willingness to be tough while not being reckless, I think should be commended.
Absolutely. Because after all, people predicted that he would be reckless.
Absolutely. And that's why I wanted to bring it up.
No, they didn't want his finger on the button, and they were talking about how dangerous it was and how were they going to sleep at night and what were they going to do and what he was going to throw. They said the same thing about Reagan, by the way. But I think Trump has been even more reticent to get us into war than Reagan.
The Democrats who are asking for war with Iran, unbelievable. When they shot down a drone, or I don't know what it was, but we have really been fortunate to have somebody who values human life in America, our troops overseas, and I think that's remarkable.
Yeah, wasn't it Biden himself who voted for those wars?
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And now you mentioned McCain. I assume you voted for McCain, Adam?
Yes, I did.
And then how did you feel when he voted? How did he feel when he voted down Obamacare? He voted to keep Obamacare when he could have voted it down.
It's exactly, well, two things. It's exactly what I said earlier in the sense of, with the new information that I had, I've adjusted my opinion of him.
Right.
However, at the time, and given the success of the Republican Party telling us that this is our best option.
Yes.
Enough years of that and Romney again, that is what birthed Donald Trump when people finally said, enough.
And what Donald Trump did was he brought out the people that nobody even knew were there, the people that never came out and voted for McCain and never came out and voted for Romney and never came out and voted for Dole and never
Yeah,
came out and voted for people like that.
Mhm.
He was able to find those people, to reach those people, to deliver a message that those people were ready to hear and bring them out. People who never voted before, and people that the experts they didn't even know they were there.
Will he be able to recreate that in November?
Well, I think that the legions of his movement, the rank and file of his movement, are the strongest rank and file that I have ever seen in my lifetime. He has an enormous amount of credibility with them. I worry that he can't hold these rallies anymore, because
Right.
that was really, those were tremendous catalysts for the movement. And I never saw anything like those rallies in my lifetime. You have to remember, I was around for JFK, for John F. Kennedy, the most charismatic, one of the most charismatic politicians of the 20th century. Okay. And people went crazy over him. And I
Right.
saw it, I witnessed it. I got to meet Kennedy myself in person, but I've never seen anything like, what would you call it, Trumpomania. And I do worry that if these people can't physically get together and rally, that concerns me. But if you saw when he went to Pennsylvania recently, it wasn't far from here in Allentown, people lined the road for miles. They lined the road with signs and flags just to get a glimpse of his car passing by. So I take great heart in that. And let's end with a sense of hopefulness about that. We're really witnessing history in the making here, yes?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
And
it is very important, based on what we've seen with the abuses by the IRS, the FBI, the national security infrastructure. It is very important that there is somebody who is actively managing that in order to protect us from those abuses.
I think we got to
who respects us.
We're out of time. Thank you, Adam. This
Yes,
has
sir.
been great. It's been
Thank you for having me.
terrific. Thanks. Bye.